5 Horror Stories About Wandering Ghosts. Horror Short Story of Old Grandmother's House. I had an old grandmother who lived in a very old house in one of the lower parts of the city, and those who are to me, I give them my grandmother's house address to go and see the house. But now, after my grandmother's death, the house is made of wood and iron. We changed. I always remember my grandmother lived alone and my grandfather had died before my father grew up. So much so that sometimes my grandmother would say that they would move the furniture and move the table here and there. I would tell them not to listen, but they would not listen. Did you not listen to food? If I had not gone there at noon. I always wanted to believe what he said until one summer night I lay in front of him and lay on the bed in the yard, although I was scared, but curiosity had overwhelmed me. I could see and I was sure I was awake because I could not sleep for fear. A little night passed. I saw a woman with long black hair, whose hair was very thick, came out of the ground. My heart was bursting with fear. She climbed the stairs and stood right behind me. I did not move and I could not even shout. I sat on the bed and just looked at him. And my mom and dad swore poison and came back and looked at me and I did not understand what happened and I lost consciousness. A woman on an abandoned road. A few years ago, a terrible incident occurred in connection with a ghost for 2 young men. The two, named Adrian and Leo, were returning home around midnight. At that time of night, no vehicles were seen on the road. Adrian was driving and Leo was sitting next to him. Adrian drove fast and passed the sharp turns slowly. Since they were both very tired, no words were exchanged between them. When they reached the entrance of the abandoned road, Adrian suddenly noticed a woman in white walking in the middle of the road. The lady was behind them and as a result only her long hair could be seen. Adrian slows down so he can see the lady's face. He asked Leo to look at the lady, and when he realized that Leo could see the woman, he was relieved. Adrian could not believe that he had seen a ghost, and at the same time he was surprised that a woman was walking on that road only at that hour of the night. Even in broad daylight, no one dared to go there on foot, because the road was narrow and extremely dangerous. Besides, what was the woman doing only in that mountainous area? Adrian glanced at Leo out of the corner of his eye. Leo looked terrified and scared. As they got closer to the woman, Adrian braked. The woman gently turned to them, and they were astonished to find out that she had a very ugly face, and they saw drops of blood on her face. Adrian became convinced that he was not a human being. As a result, he quickly pressed his foot on the accelerator pedal and decided to overtake the woman and run away, but they did not know what would happen to them after taking her down. A few seconds later, Leo looked back hesitantly to see if the woman was still there, and saw in horror the woman's head in the back seat. Leo was so scared he did not know what to do or say. Adrian leaned back in the mirror and noticed that the headless woman was following them. After that incident, Adrian and Leo were shocked for a long time and their speech power was weakened. After a long time, they explained the flow to their relatives and decided never to approach that road. The girls were heartbroken to hear the Annabelle story and decided to keep the doll, but a more frightening story happened to them when they had to seek help again. One day their friend Lou came to their house when he woke up at night, but he could not move. Lou looked around the room but saw nothing, looked down and saw Annabelle standing at his feet, the doll slowly starting to rise from he kicks her, passes over her chest, and then the doll's arms lock around her neck and begin to suffocate her. Lou loses consciousness after this incident and comes to his senses the next day, not knowing that this incident was a terrible nightmare or in fact happened to him. But the next day something happens that he realizes that the doll is terrible. While Lou was in Angie's room, she heard voices from Donna's room while Dina was not at home at all. Lou thinks that someone has entered the house without permission, but realizes that the voice was related to Annabelle. Lou goes to Dina's room and sees the doll on a chair instead of on the bed. When Lou tries to walk towards the doll, her whole body suddenly becomes paralyzed and the feeling of paralysis in the chest area increases. Lou looks down at his foot and sees 7 perfects, 3 vertical strokes and 4 horizontal strokes. Lou looks around in horror, but sees no one there, and the only thing that comes to mind is Annabelle. Everyone could see the scratches on Lou's body, but the scratches healed strangely in 2 days and left no trace while the paws were all hot. Once again, the girls thought of a solution, this time with the help of a priest named Hagen's father. But the priest said to them, "This is a matter of spirits and needs more power." They contacted Ed and Lauren, a couple who were like ghost hunters, and found out that the doll had an evil and inhuman spirit. The couple declared that the doll was not possessed, but was controlled by a spirit, because inanimate objects could not be possessed. Warren's actions were timely, because if Annabelle continued to work, she could have killed one of the members of that house. The couple elevated the spirituality of the home with words that included 7 pages of sentences that were positive in nature and prevented the devil from entering the home. They took Annabelle's doll to their museum for safekeeping and poured holy water on it to prevent Annabelle's dolls from attacking. As the family says, she pulled the car brake and deflected the steering wheel when they took it, but when the holy water poured on it seemed to work. Annabelle's doll is now housed in the Ed and Lauren Warren Museum in a glass box with a "Do Not Open" warning. 4. Baby Girl Soul. It was about 2 in the morning and I was just driving home from my friend's party. I live in Bigo, north of Guam. Because I was very sleepy, I turned on the car recorder so that I might not fall asleep. Then I increased the speed of the car a little, as if I was speeding. I was in the middle of the road when I suddenly saw a little girl on the side of the road. I could feel the weight of his stare completely on me. As I slowed down, I wondered what a girl of that age was doing on the side of the road at that time of night. I wanted to reverse when I suddenly felt someone close to me. When I looked back in the mirror, I was about to empty the mold of panic, because I saw the same little girl with her face stuck to the windshield of the car. At first I thought I was delusional, so after a lot of arguing, I looked back in the mirror again, but when I did not see anything, I was somewhat relieved. When I looked at the side of the road, I did not see any trace of the girl there either. I put the car mirror up so I don't have to face those horrible scenes again. Although I still had that weird feeling, I felt like I was not alone. Upset and somewhat frightened, I hurried home and prayed that the police would not arrest me for speeding. It was not long before I forgot that strange feeling, and I felt a little relieved that I was so close to home, but just as I approached the front door of our house, I felt the same strange feeling that this time was stranger than before. When I looked at the sidewalk, I saw the girl there. He was sitting on the sidewalk and smiling at me. Shocked, I suddenly lost control of my car and crashed into a tree in front of my house. I screamed out of the car window as I screamed aimlessly. As a result of my screams, my parents and neighbors woke up and came to me to see what was going on. At first my parents comforted me, but when I explained the whole thing to them, my father blamed me for the disgrace. I woke up the neighbors and I knocked on the car door. But I was sure I had seen the spirit and not been deluded. A few days later I went to the same place where I had seen the girl. There, under the grass, I found a small cross. Apparently, the girl and her family were killed in a car accident years ago. Of course I'm not sure, but I imagine he was going to get in my car that night. I will never forget that fake night, and after that, whenever I come home late at night, I take someone with me. The last thing I saw was my desktop clock showing 12:07, when a woman stuck her long, rotten fingernails into my chest and held my mouth with her other hand so I wouldn't hear it. Suddenly I woke up and sat on the bed, and I was relieved that I was dreaming, that my eyes fell on my desktop clock 12:06. In my closet with a quiet voice opened.